Welcome to the Doctors Making a Difference podcast, where we help physicians to be empowered with the tools they need to be successful in medicine, in finance, and in life. Join us as we highlight doctors and other professionals around the world who are making a difference. Doctors change lives every day, but what happens when life changes yours? A single injury, a sudden illness, your career, your income, your future can shift in an instant. The best physicians don't just plan for success, they protect it. At Set for Life Insurance, they believe financial security isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. True own occupation disability insurance ensures that no matter what happens, your future stays in your hands. Because protecting your income means protecting everything you've built. Visit drpodcastnetwork.co/set for life today. Secure your future before life makes the choice for you. Today we have the privilege of having Dr. Leo Damasco here with us. Leo has done some pretty cool stuff, and I think you're going to find this conversation to be interesting. He is certified as both a pediatrician and an ER doctor, and has transitioned a lot of his work to be telemedicine. He started a podcast called Telemedicine Talks. Leo's done a whole bunch of stuff that's within medicine, adjacent to medicine, and is still very passionate about what he does. And so I think you'll find this conversation to be fascinating. So, Leo, do you mind introducing yourself to our audience?
Yeah, hey, thanks, Peter. Thanks for having me on your podcast. I do host a sister podcast, Telemedicine Talks, and it was awesome meeting you and making this connection because, yeah, I think we share the same kind of thoughts on, what it is being a doctor and where it's going. So, yeah, you're right. I'm a dual boarded pediatrician and emergency medicine that went through military training. So started peds, was a gen peds doc for 3 years after residency, decided, hey, maybe clinic was not for me. And so went to the emergency department where, that fit my attitude and just kind of just me in general. And then did that for a good 5, 6 years. And then COVID hit. And, just like everybody else, COVID forced me to think outside the box, especially since the patient numbers went down and RVUs went down, and found telemedicine, long story short. And what started as this COVID telemedicine side gig quickly transformed into, hey, this is my main gig. This is my main form of work. And, it was really an afterthought at first, but I was able to find freedom in terms of, time, place, financial freedom, plus fulfillment, and where I didn't think I would find in telemedicine. And yeah, now it is my, 99% effort gig. So,
Yeah, who knew,
yeah.
right? And it's interesting how we had all these tools prior to the COVID pandemic, but during that time, all these tools suddenly people kind of found a way, like, hey, we can make this work, and people can actually exchange ideas, have that be your main form of communication in some interactions, and perform decent medicine with telemedicine, and it really exploded during that time. So your interest in that really correlated well with the onset of that.
Yeah, no, actually, it was because of that,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah.
I don't think without COVID, you're right. The technology was there, everything was set up, and things were going, but it wasn't necessarily mainstream, right? You would see insurers that offer some telemedicine services, but it was just kind of, oh, okay, this is nice, kind of a gimmicky kind of thing, right?
Yeah, like an
And
extra
with
perk or something, but not your
right,
main
right,
thing, right?
exactly. And with COVID, when we were forced to do it, that's when, the technology, the processes, the workflows, plus the laws changed, right?
Yeah.
Where it opened everything up. And and that's when a lot of us realized that, hey, this is a thing, and this is something that we could actually do.
Yeah. Well, walk me back a little bit through. You shared with me before we hit record that you have the privilege of living in beautiful Hawaii, and I
Correct.
want to know how a kid from LA grew up and became a doctor with the military and ended up in Hawaii. Kind of walk us through that
Oh
process.
man, this is way long back. So yeah, no, I grew up in Los Angeles. Went to high school in Pasadena and went to college in San Diego, and really kind of like with telemedicine, I never thought I was going to be in the military. Out of San Diego, out of California, it's very competitive,
Right.
trying to get in med school, right? And found an avenue through the military to get through med school. If you would have told me in undergrad that I was going to be in the military, I would have just laughed at you. So, so this was different, right? So I go in and go through school through the Uniformed Services University in Bethesda, the military med school,
Hmm.
and complete your pediatric residency. And initially I thought I was going to be a pediatrician, maybe do a subspecialty in pediatrics, and quickly realized, no. I like the pace of the ER. I like the variety, and luckily, talked to the right people in the military, and they decided to send me to emergency medicine residency,
So you
and
did
did
two
that.
two full separate residencies.
Two full residencies, which, if you think about it, the pediatric fellowships are 3 years. ER residency was 3 years.
Right.
So I just dealt with it like another fellowship almost.
Hmm.
Other than, when you walk in as a fellow versus you walk in as a new intern, it's a little different. So I forgot about that
That's
and I
true.
had to
Yeah, you had to
deal
go
with
through
that all
the
over again.
intern experience again. Yeah,
Right,
yeah,
right. And
hard.
sitting there in pimp lines and like, oh man, I'm here in intern pimp lines again, getting
Right.
grilled. And I'm like, I don't miss this part.
No.
So, um, yeah. And after ER residency, and I did that in Washington State, they sent me to Hawaii, Triple Army Medical Center, where I served as staff. I served as the chief of the ER there, and my time ran out, and I got out largely because of kids, and
Hmm.
during all that time, during all that story, started a family, so forth and so on, and priorities changed, and realized, hey, maybe getting deployed and being out and just jetting off somewhere is not the best for the kids. So, separated out of the military in Hawaii,
Yeah.
and never looked back. It's hard, and I don't know if you all visited Hawaii or stayed here for a prolonged period of time, but it's hard to leave once you've kind of
Yeah.
sown just a little roots, and now we've sown roots, and yeah, now we're here in Hawaii.
Yeah, Hawaii is one of those places that everybody loves to visit, and if you can figure out a way to make it, because it's expensive to live there and all
Oh
that stuff.
yeah, yeah.
But if you can figure out a way to have a job that will support you living in Hawaii and a place for your family that will thrive, what a blessing! It's such a neat
Oh,
place.
absolutely, absolutely. And it's, we're thankful every day. We're thankful every day because, yeah, it's funny because flying back home, I visit LA all the time to visit my family and my sister, so forth. But flying back home, it's funny to hear the people, just excited to board the plane. Hey,
Yeah.
this is my vacation. I've saved up so long for this. In the back of my head, like, oh, we're just kind of going home. So
Yeah.
so it's fun. It's fun to, just realize that.
No, it's a beautiful place. Well, that's interesting. So your military career is really kind of what led to all this because you had opportunities within the military and then ended up when you retired you were in Hawaii already and so it allowed you to kind of
Correct.
make that transition. But what do you just kind of a sidebar here for a minute, Leo? You chose the military route, which has a lot of benefits. It also has some drawbacks, like you said, you could be deployed at any time,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
you're having it that stand. What would you tell someone who's considering that today if they say I'm a young person interested in becoming a doctor and I want to go to the Uniformed Service Medical School or I want to do something with the military?
That's an interesting question because, going through and actually being part of the military, there was a lot of grumbling on my end. A lot of grumbling, a lot of complaining, and that's very common, right? Because uh, when you're an attending, you get paid maybe half of what your civilian counterparts make. You get these random orders. Hey, get your gear at 6 a.m. and form up for formation's sake, and
Right.
there's a lot of stuff. But looking back in what the opportunities the military gave me and the education gave me, looking back and taking account of all that, they gave me two residencies. The
Mm-hmm.
second residency, I was paid as an attending. I wasn't even paid as
Because you'd
just
already done
because.
the years, and so
Exactly,
right, right.
exactly. I was paid per rank. I was not a poor med student. I was not a poor resident. I was a decent living wage. And the education was great. And, on the ER side, especially in the military, and the uniqueness of the setting in the military, I've learned things that I couldn't probably learned in a civilian setting because my military trainers went through different unique scenarios and created some of the methods out there that, that are found in the ER that are novel. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So looking back, the older me would say, hey, definitely think long and hard about it. It is a very valid avenue to go through. It is good to great training, and you're going to have a lot of opportunities. And especially if you want to be a leader, the military, and I almost begrudgingly kind of accept this fact is that they make good leaders. They teach you how to lead from the very get go, know how to lead a team, know how to do processes, so forth and so on. That you know, frankly, your average doctor may not have because they weren't put in those opportunities, especially early on. But
Yeah, well,
yes,
you're put in.
definitely
I
look
mean,
into it.
yeah, because you're part of a military command structure, as
Yeah,
part
yeah,
right from the get-go. And so I know I've talked to some my other friends who have gone that route, and they've talked about that. If you spend time overseas or in some of your training, you're part of a command structure, and you do have to learn to work as a team. And sometimes, for better or worse, sometimes doctors kind of get this lone wolf mentality where like I'm the one that knows everything, and you just do it my way, and that's good. But you
yeah.
do also have to be able to work with a team so that you can get things done because you can't do it all.
No, no, absolutely, absolutely. And I was, just looking back, I was thrown from day one after residency. I, they were like, "Hey, you're now running this clinic, and you're the boss." I'm like, I just
Alrighty.
graduated residency, and I never sought out leadership positions, but everywhere I went, it was like, "Hey, now you're the boss, and
Yeah.
now you're running the Korea clinic. You're the head pediatrician in all of Korea." I'm like, "Oh, that's
Oh,
great."
did you get to do that a deployment in Korea then?
I did. So
Wow.
after it's funny. So after Peds residency, they decided, hey, you pediatrician, you are going to run a troop clinic in Guantanamo Bay.
Mm,
And
goodness.
then after that, hey, you're going to be the chief pediatrician in Korea.
Mm,
And then I switched to ER after that. Then after
yeah.
that, after ER, they're like, hey, you're going to be the chief of the ER in Hawaii. It was,
Yeah.
yeah, it was just position after position after position.
Yeah, so I guess
So,
for someone that's considering it, that's one potential benefit is
yeah.
it's the leadership training is sort of baked in, and if you
Oh,
have any
absolutely.
aptitude for it, you probably be given those opportunities. And I know the uh, financially, it's good you don't, and if you don't have to pay for medical school, but you also owe, you also
Oh,
have
yeah.
to drop
Yeah.
everything at the drop of a hat and go to Korea if they tell you. So it's kind of a back and forth.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. Right. I didn't walk away with $500,000 in loans,
Right.
but yeah, I did have to, give 7 years of my life
Hmm.
to the military. And you're right. You're their property, right?
Yeah.
When they want you to go, your answer is, okay, yeah, I'm going to go.
Yeah, no,
So
it's a trade-off, and so, but for the financial game, that is a big benefit because if you walk
huge.
out of school, like you say, with a lot of times people are 300, $500,000 in debt, just a
Yeah. Yeah.
tremendous number, and depending on how much what your interest rate is and stuff like that, it can be a real burden. And I know people who are in their 60s who are still paying on those loans, and
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
it
Yeah.
becomes kind of you can't just go, it's like not on a house, you could sell your house, but your education loans, they are
Yep.
there, and they are only worth a piece of paper on the wall that says you have a degree and you're licensed to do something. And so it puts us in kind of a precarious financial situation.
It does. It does. And handcuffs us too, especially when you're a young doctor just getting out of residency, trying to find your first job. That's a big part of your thought process, right? And I took it for granted. I never had to think about that.
Yeah, well,
Um,
and it's one of the things when I think about sometimes physicians any of us can get tripped up and say, I have to do this same job, the same thing for 30 years, and I could never change. And then you feel like when you are given something that isn't really the best for patient care or something that really isn't good for your family or your time or whatever, and you have somebody dictating to you how you're going to do it, you feel somewhat handcuffed. You say, "Well, I can't
oh
give up
yeah.
this job because I have to make these payments." And then we compound it. We come out of training and you're in your 30s sometime, and you're like, "Well, all my other peers house and a car and a boat and a vacation home, and so sometimes people accumulate all those things right up front, and then you really are kind of golden handcuffs. You've got lots of financial burden, and then your freedom is sacrificed because of that. So boy, it's a real challenging financial lesson a lot of people have to learn.
No, absolutely, absolutely. And you see that all the time, right? You see that all the time.
Yeah, sure is better to kind of grow it slowly. Like, if people can save up for those things, then you can have all those, and the stuff doesn't make people happier, but having a place to spend time with people you love and the time to spend with the people you love, those are the greatest gifts.
Yeah, I know. And it's that mindset too, right? Straight off the bat, you see, especially as doctors, you lose your 20s, right? Because you're always studying
Right.
and you see your peers that aren't doctors doing some cool stuff, traveling even, buying things, and you're sitting there, at Starbucks studying all the time. And then once you can, you start, like you said, you start doing that, trying to accumulate wealth. But,
Yeah.
switching that mindset to, hey, my time and my experiences are way more valuable to me than these things physically. And yeah, yeah, I've found a lot of kind of more happiness into that kind of thinking.
Well, and I think this will harken back to this as we talk about telemedicine because
Yeah,
uh, when we measure our lives and you look back over the last decade, you say what mattered to me, and at least for me, I don't think about like, oh, I was so glad I logged all those extra hours in the ER. I really was glad
right.
I jumped in and did that extra 2 or 3 weeks while everybody else went on vacation. Or, like the time worked allows us to be able to earn an income and provide for our families. But when you think about what's actually valuable and meaningful, it's a time doing things you love or spending time with people you love or traveling to places that you enjoy or volunteering in organizations that you believe in.
Yeah,
And we have to be careful not to paint ourselves into a corner, so to speak, financially. Or if we do that early on, people get to the place where they want to make a change or a pivot, and they feel financially crippled that they couldn't branch out. So, Leo, this is it. I think that's pretty neat that you've been able to do this. So when that time came to shift or pivot, you had the ability to do so.
yeah, yeah. And I did have the ability to do so. And, creating that ability and leaning on kind of the resources and the support that I had was huge, was huge. Because you're right, because the golden handcuffs, they definitely, they keep you in your situation where you have one way of thinking, you think that, hey, this is the only way this could happen. And over time, you may not be in a situation that you want to be. And you're right, a lot of us lose sight on what's important, right? Looking back, thinking about it, you're right. It's experiences that I love. And, it's the time with my kids, right? What's that? What's kind of the data on that? You spend more time with your kids before they're 18, 0 to 18 than 18 to, when you're dead.
Right.
And that could be 20, 30 years. And, actually that statistic drives me a lot. I have two young
Yeah.
kids. They're oh, they're gonna hate it. I always forget their birthdays. 11 and 6, 11 and
Yeah.
7. And I'm getting close. I'm getting close. The 11-year-old, I'm halfway through already. And
Yeah.
and that scares me. I'm like, oh no, I need, it's 7 more years until I am no longer relevant in their life, right?
Right.
Hopefully I still am.
You want to be
But
relevant, but you won't have the
but
number of
yeah,
hours. Right.
exactly, exactly. I just can't turn there and you're gonna be right there. So
No. Well,
that thought drives me a lot.
when you did this pivot to telemedicine, I want to kind of talk, if you're willing to share kind of that process.
Yeah.
Certainly, the COVID needs, made it so that you could kind of pivot and spend more hours taking care of people on a telemedicine, but it also, gave you a little bit of latitude to kind of set your work location, maybe your work hours. So, do you mind walking us through
Yeah.
that a little bit? What was that like to make that shift from a brick and mortar show up to work to telemedicine, both as a physician and then as a family man?
Yeah, no, it was a big mind shift. It was a big mind shift. So when I first started, the whole telemedicine shift really started from COVID. And, when COVID started, it was funny. I thought to myself, oh, ER is going to be bulletproof in COVID. We saw clinics go down. We saw, other doctors, their productivity went down and their income went down because, well, patients weren't coming in, right? Because
Right.
they couldn't, right? And back of my head, I was like, oh, bulletproof. Patients are always going to come in, and I was wrong. I was working for a big group in Hawaii, still affiliated with them, but we saw our numbers go down 50%.
Goodness.
And we are paid per RVUs, and that's 50% of our income go down. Our shifts were getting cut, and we were all scrambling for side gigs, right? All scrambling for different ways to make up that loss. And really, initially, telemedicine wasn't my initial way to do that. It was another way. But my partner, who I spent a lot of time with because we were both nocturnists together in the ER, we would talk, and he had this telemedicine side gig, and he was telling me all about it. And he said, "Hey, you got to look into this. This is going to blow up. This is huge, and if you do it right, you could really find freedom, fulfillment, and you could kind of replace what you do here in the ER." And I didn't tell you this when we were talking about it before, but the road wasn't that straight for me. There is an initial cost commitment, to getting telemedicine. You know, one of the things that is helpful is to get licenses, so get licensed up in all the states, and that costs a whole lot
Right.
of money,
That's true.
right? And I was like, oh, I just don't have that money right now. And just, he was just starting out, and I compared, what we were making, and it was equal between our side gigs, and it just didn't make financial sense. And actually, I was still a reservist, and I get the call to go. And in the middle of COVID, they send me into middle of nowhere, and practicing ER in the middle of nowhere. Gone for 6 months, come back, and this partner I was talking to, he was gone. He was out of the part. He was not doing ER anymore. He was
Oh,
out
so
of
he
brick
had
and
left.
mortar.
Oh, wow.
He
He
had
had
left.
left.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And I was like, what are you talking about? I knew how much he was making with his telemedicine gig. There's no way he could support his family. And the rest of the nocturnists, the rest of the night crew said, no, this is exactly what he's doing. Oh, and heads up, we're leaving too soon
Mm,
because we could do this. And that's when the light clicked. That's when the light clicked, and I was like, oh man, this is a valid avenue. This is something that can actually be done. So, made the money commitment. That was a huge money commitment.
to get
I was
licensed everywhere, right?
everywhere. Yeah. Yeah. I was saving for a renovation, saving up for a new car. And I was like, I come back to the friend that was doing telemedicine. I was like, all right, tell me how to do this. And I'm going to trust you. I'm giving up my renovation money, my car money to go all in. And, he introduced me to community, and through their support and through their guidance, showed me the way through, and, got licensed up, found jobs. And what started to be, what started as a just a temporary side gig to augment what I was doing in the ER quickly became my main source of income.
Hmm. Well,
And yeah, yeah, it was interesting. And not just that, because of the nature of telemedicine, I was able to dictate where I practiced, when I practiced, what I want to practice, and open up new interests like doing podcasts.
yeah.
So
Well, yeah, and that's how you and I met each other through the
yeah,
Doctor
yeah,
Podcast Network. One of the sister podcasts to Doctors Making a Difference is Telemedicine Talks, and I was like, this is
yeah.
fascinating what Leo's doing and what he's done with his education and his career advancement. That's pretty neat. So, do you mostly do pediatrics, or would you say you're more ER based, or kind of a combination of both?
A combination of both. And actually, so, just like anything pediatrics, right? The pediatrics market is lagging, right?
Mm,
The pediatrics kind of always lags adults. So I do have some strictly pediatric focused telemedicine gigs. But a lot of the stuff is adult based. A lot of stuff, there's some niche kind of medicine services as well. So it's a mix of both. And I think that's part of the key is kind of mixing and matching. I just
yeah.
don't. So, and then just finding that good mix and match where, you could have multiple sources of income without necessarily, breaking the bank in terms of time commitment.
Yeah. So did you start like up front? Did you start your own business, or did you work for somebody else's
No, no.
platform?
I just worked for somebody else's platform.
Yeah.
So, and, having the licenses and having the experience, they definitely value you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, it was, it's not instantaneous, but you have leverage coming in and
Yeah.
you walk in the door and say, hey, this is what I could offer. And people start to listen.
That's pretty cool. And you mentioned before we hit record, you have an opportunity to some in a lot of states that require a collaborating physician to
Correct.
work with our non-physician advanced practitioners, NPs, PAs. And so, have you done that a little bit?
Yeah, yeah, I have. Back and forth, I've done it. I've I've been in agreements with individuals. Also, I've been in agreements through bigger companies, and I've enjoyed both. I see it as an opportunity to be a mentor. I
Yeah,
know there's some stigma behind it. Well, hey, you're training the people that are going to take our jobs, and to some extent, that's always a concern in the back of our heads. But the way I see it is, hey, these providers are fulfilling a need. If there wasn't a need, there wouldn't really be that kind of this market. But somebody has to provide guidance. Somebody has to make sure that there is good practice out there, and stepping up to be that mentor, to be that collaborator, to make sure that the medicine that we think is good practice is actually being practiced.
yeah.
So
Well, and I think like I've had the privilege of working with NPs and PAs. A lot of them are just excellent, wonderful, dedicated people. When they finish training, a lot of them have, just a lot less training than a physician. I think on average, it's less than 1,000 hours of formal hours of training at the end of school. And then, of course, the idea is that you'd go work with a team of physicians and you're part of a team and you work together and you bounce ideas. And some states have a formal regulatory thing where you need to have a collaborating
yeah,
physician. Other states do not. But it works best in that model when you're working as part of a team. And I don't think that it was ever intended for folks to finish that training and then just suddenly be on their own right then and there with no other collaboration because it's inadequate training. But if we work as part of a team, then it can really be a positive thing. And you want to make sure that at the end of it, that our patients, the people who are relying on us to make good decisions and make good recommendations, are doing so based on good evidence and good practice and experience. And you can't replace that experience by just giving somebody a degree. We have to make sure we educate. So I think it's noble. I think it's good, Leo, to continue to enable and empower people to be able to. You want to be able to have people practice within the confines of their license, but also be able to do it at a level that would be the same they would as if they came to your office and saw you.
yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. I think yeah, and there's definitely roles, a lot of roles for that for physicians out there, especially if you're branching out to multiple states.
Oh
So
yeah. So what would you tell someone who is starting out or someone who is in their 40s like me or someone who's even farther on and someone's in their 50s or 60s like how would you tell someone to get started if they say I want to do this as a side thing or I think I want to do just telemedicine. How would you tell them to begin that process?
yeah, so first and foremost is you have to educate yourself, right? You have to educate yourself. You have to know what you're getting into because the process isn't that simple, right? Or it can be, but then you could find yourself in a lot of trouble if you don't educate yourself,
Right.
right? Because yeah, you could get your licenses, you could find jobs, and you could start working, but if you don't know the rules, right, and if you don't know the regulations, then yeah, you're going to get stuck. And you may find yourself in a scenario where you're facing a medical board, you're facing malpractice lawsuits, you're facing jail time. And I'm not saying this to scare people, but really, education is key. It's huge. It's huge. Because and doctors aren't used to thinking this way because most of us are used to working in one location, maybe multiple states, but not all of them, right? And not only do you have to worry about malpractice considerations, am I practicing good medicine, which we are very good at thinking about that, right? It's ingrained, right?
Right.
From the very start of med school. Hey, this is malpractice standard care. But we also have to think about is this are we following regulations? Are we following state to state? Are we compliant? And that's kind of the big buzz term. Are you practicing compliantly? Are you following the unique state rules if they're unique state rules? Some states don't allow you to practice certain types of medicine. Some states don't allow you to practice, your certain workflow. Some states, you have to talk to a patient face to face, like we're talking right now via video. But some states you don't need that necessarily in terms of specific types of medicine, and that's just okay. That's acceptable, and you can still practice great care. But if you don't know that, and you practice a different type of medicine in a state where you can't, yeah, you're gonna face the board, right? Nobody ever
Right.
wants that. Also, you know, uh, just navigating kind of the different platforms, so forth and so on. Another thing is find yourself a community. Find yourself a community out there, because this switch is is not only it's kind of mind-boggling for doctors, because we're so used to clocking in, clocking out, shift work, blah blah blah. But now that you have all these opportunities, right? Um, there's a lot of mindset issues. How do I focus? How do I prioritize? How do I get into something new? Right? Dude, this is something
Right.
new. You're basically becoming your own business person now, especially if you're, a contractor. And a lot of us don't know how to be that. How do you navigate that? So finding yourself a good group of people that you could trust, that you could talk to, that you could bounce ideas off of. I think that was key too, because I was able to find a good group of people. Also, talk to people that know the rules. Talk to, I'm going to plug my partner in telemedicine talks. Phoebe, she was a prior state regulator, and she makes it her business to help businesses, help doctors navigate those rules. It's nothing that you want to skimp on, because yeah, if you do it wrong, again, you could find yourself in deep waters. There's horror stories of people that didn't collaborate correctly. There's horror stories of people that, were unknowingly committing Medicare fraud
Hmm.
because they just didn't know, right? It's you don't know what you don't know, and so you
Right.
you don't know to ask. So that's step one, and that's kind of lengthy answer.
No,
Sorry,
but it's
but
important to emphasize that,
right,
it's we don't it's not the Wild West. Maybe during COVID initially it was a little bit
yeah,
unregulated and wild, but most states have figured out what their
yes,
regulations are on this,
yeah,
and they're all a little bit different. And like
yeah,
we tell people in my practice, because we live in a cold area, so a lot of people travel for the winter, and I basically say like, well, I can help you, but it depends on what state you're in. Some states
right,
I can continue to see you via telemedicine and address things and refill medications and whatever you need, and some states I can't. So it depends on where you go and what license I hold and where
yeah,
you're at, and it just so it kind of creates some uncertainty. So I am always trying to seek additional information just
yeah.
to serve that small group of patients that travel to warmer climates in the winter.
Yeah, no, no, that's exactly it, right? That's exactly it, right? Because if they travel, if they travel to, let's say Arizona, I think
Right,
Arizona is pretty strict. You better video call them. I don't know. And then if they travel to California, now they're e-prescribing rules, right? So you could only, they almost require you to e-prescribe, and if you can't do that, you can't call in meds anymore.
right.
In California, that's not a really widely accepted
And you need
practice.
to have a license in the state where they are located,
Correct.
which is
Correct.
interesting because we'll say, well, you are an established patient in my clinic in Idaho, but if you are in California or Arizona or Nevada or anywhere, because they go across that entire Southwest belt. If you're in that state, I basically need to have a license in the state where you are residing, because that's the regulatory environment where this will be. That's where its jurisdiction is in the state where you're located, and that is
No,
kind of hard
exactly.
hard for patients to kind of wrap their mind around. Well, you're still my doctor. I'll be there in 6 months. Like, well, true, but right now I can help you, but I can't really do this unless we've gone through that regulatory stuff, because I can't put my license in jeopardy over something like that.
Exactly. No, exactly. And it's hard for patients, right, to wrap their heads around that. And sometimes hard for doctors to wrap their
Yeah.
heads around that,
Oh
right? They're
yeah.
like, this is my patient. I just call it in. What are you talking about? But yeah, yeah, if you're not licensed in most states, you can't prescribe in that state. So, yeah.
Yeah, so far, like I've been able to, when people are traveling for a weekend or something, for a spring break, I can usually send something to the pharmacy because they forgot their blood pressure
Yeah.
medicine, and they've not given us any trouble on that. But a lot of times people are finding a new problem and they need a follow-up visit or something, and
Yeah.
like it has to be done through the proper channels. And anyway,
Yeah.
it's been an interesting process to learn, even just tangentially. And so I've been interested to talk, hear what you guys talk about on telemedicine talks with the podcast. And there's a whole world of things to learn, but it is helpful to kind of hear your experience and how you began the process, not as someone who had it all figured out right on day one, but as over time you've learned more and more about it.
Oh, and still is, right? It's
Oh
an
yeah.
ever learning process. And the way the environment is, it's an ever changing process. And you kind of mentioned it before, it was kind of the wild, wild west of COVID. And now states are catching up and starting to put, I think appropriately, the regulations there, right? We have to stay abreast of that too. So yeah, it's always keeping an eye on kind of those issues.
Yeah. Well, so I guess when I think about the question I want to ask you, Leo, is it worth it? If someone says, it sounds great. I want the freedom and flexibility and,
Yeah.
I want to be able to do the time and place of my choosing. Yeah. Would you say it's worth it, for someone who's thinking about it?
100%. a
Oh,
hundred
really?
percent.
Okay.
I'm a big proponent of it. Um, it's changed my life. It really, really has. Before this, I was a nocturnist and I worked for a great ER group and they were very supportive, but I was burnt out. I was burnt out. I was going through COVID and, just like in the ER, ran into every shift I came out. I was like, well, did I actually make a difference? You know, the patients don't like me. Yeah, I have to duck poop all the time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and finding this has been a huge game changer. Not only do I have freedom now, right? I have freedom to practice where I want to. I have freedom to practice when I want to. And it's actually it pays pretty well. So now I have financial freedom to do things that I want to and delve into avenues where I didn't think I would be able to. Right. So before this, me and my family are very close, but I wouldn't see my sisters, my parents, they all live in California, but live in Hawaii. I would see them maybe once a year, once every other year. I see them every 3 months.
Hmm.
I go take the family, fly back, stay there for days, and I know I could work on the plane. I could work, in a different time zone, and I'm not going to lose out on anything. Also, when I set my schedule now, because of the flexibility of telemedicine, I set my priorities first. Before, when you set your schedule, you'd have to wait, right? You'd have to, what's my shift schedule? You know, let's see what my schedule is when it's published. Then we fit everything else. We fit
Right.
life around work. Now I fit work around life, right? My schedule starts with my kids' practices. Surf time. That's huge.
Oh
Golf
yeah.
time,
No, it's super
right?
important.
Right. And that's a standing repetitive schedule on my calendar. And work is fit into those gaps. It's total the opposite. It's
Yeah, that
great.
is
Right.
opposite. Well,
And now with the financial freedom too, looking into starting a business, doing this podcast, able to do stuff that I really, really enjoy. And, switching the gears, I thought, hey, from ER to telemedicine, when I started out, one of my partners, I was talking to him about telemedicine and how happy I was. And one of the partners was like, hey, you're not saving lives. You're not doing cool things in the ER. And part of that is true. Well, really one question is how many lives did I really save in the ER? Like, you know, um, but there's other forms of clinical fulfillment that I found. The companies I work for, I try to focus on, people that don't necessarily have good access to care, women's health, um, pediatric health, new moms, things that really fulfill me and finding leadership roles in that and being able to grow kind of my entrepreneurship side, my business side is actually very, very fulfilling.
yeah.
And I found it, it's refreshing, right? I was getting burnt out. And this is actually kind of reinvigorated kind of interest in clinical medicine, in medicine in general, and just get me going again.
Yeah, it's one of those things you reflect on as a system. You certainly don't want everybody to leave brick and mortar medicine
Right.
because you
Right.
still got to have someone do the surgeries. You got to have
Yeah.
someone in the ER when you show up and you need you need stitches, or you got to have you're sick and you need to be in the ICU. You need to be able to have people who are boots on the ground. In an ideal world, wouldn't it be great if we didn't burn our doctors out? If we said,
Oh,
look,
absolutely.
your time and your commitment to this fits your life. And
Right.
I think there's probably a way for telemedicine to enhance or augment what we do, and so that maybe you don't have to get to the place of sort of this soul crushing burnout and then leave before you can come back. And it would be nice to crescendo or decrescendo a career based on different chapters of life, and not say I'm so financially burdened that I have to put my entire life scheduled around this ER schedule, around this clinic
Yeah.
schedule, around this OR schedule, and instead say, well, I've got the ability, I've got the latitude to work what I want. Think about this: what if you only worked 40 hours a week as a physician? It would be mind-numbing, crazy,
Mind-boggling, right?
mind-boggling,
Mind-boggling,
awesome. And I don't
right?
think of people would be so burned out if you're like,
No.
I don't know any doctors who work who have only worked part time who say like I work 20 or 30 hours a week and I'm just so burned out, because it's usually it's a lack of control, or it's the
Right.
ability to control the time and spend the time doing the things you love. And so this is kind of an avenue for it. If you say someone wants to be able to derive some income but not be in their same exact job at all times. It sounds like there's a place for telemedicine to kind of enhance or augment that, so that when you're in the ER, you're not just frying yourself to a crisp and then just leaving because you're so frustrated, but you can do it on your
Absolutely.
own terms.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's working because you want to work now,
Yeah.
right? And you don't have to go all in. You don't have to give up your brick and mortar practice. Definitely, that's not what that's not what I'm advocating. But you're right, maybe going down from 16 shifts to 8 shifts,
Yeah.
and freeing up half of that time, going down to 4 shifts. I'm actually thinking about going back into brick and mortar because, I kind of miss the interaction, miss the contact. But it's because I want to,
Right. On your
right?
terms.
Yes, yeah, exactly, exactly. It's
Yeah.
gonna be on my schedule, my terms, and yeah, it's gonna be a lot more enjoyable because and it's never like, oh, I hate my job, but now it's like, hey, this is just another fulfilling thing for me,
Right.
and that's definitely what was lacking beforehand.
Well, all of us should sit down once in a while and say, what does my ideal life look like? What does my actual life look
Absolutely.
like? And then try to find that intersection, because like when I envision that for myself, I think like, okay, well, wouldn't it be great if I was in, because I'm mostly in clinic, but we work in the
Yeah.
ER and deliver the babies and everything in rural medicine. But wouldn't it be nice if my life involved, 4 days a week, and you were done by 2 or 3 o'clock? Like that would be amazing to work and say like
Amazing.
that's a 32-hour week. I mean, just that sounds like overwhelming, amazing, awesome. Like it just sounds unbelievably good. And yet I don't, like, at this point I haven't felt like I could do it. But if
Mm.
you had telemedicine, you could say that like, well,
Yeah.
I do
Yeah.
this, and we kind of we build a schedule, but the clinic side of it could be just a little bit more adaptable, because you can drive income from other sources that are not just
Absolutely.
being in the same place doing the same thing.
It's funny. It's funny you say that. You say, hey, I want to only work 40 hours. I want
I
to do what
know
I want to do,
that
get off
would
at
feel
2.
like a break.
Right. It's funny because non-doctors do that all the time.
Right.
That is their normal, right? If
Right.
they if when we talk, and if they're like, oh, I work 60, 80 hours, that's a double shift, so forth and so on. That is our normal, right?
That is the norm.
We are ingrained, I call it clinical monkey mindset. We're
Clinical
ingrained as
monkey
clinical
mindset.
monkeys,
Yeah.
right? We're just do it, go. And we're like, thank you so much. We're gonna do it. Thank you for this opportunity. But, this has given me the opportunity to break out of that mold. And a lot of people actually break out of the mold, break out of that mindset where, hey, I need to, this is the only way. This is the only way it needs to happen. This is the only way it can happen. But yeah, breaking out of that mold is great.
Yeah, finding the ability to still find joy in medicine, I think has emerged as kind of one of the themes of this podcast. Because what we all of us go into medicine because you do want to make a difference. You want to help
Yep.
people. You want to have this thing, and then if you do it too much, you find yourself losing some of the joyful part of it, and you feel like I'm just dreading or drudgery. But we have to get back in the driver's seat on our time and our decision making capacity, And if we do that, then I think there is great joy in medicine. I really love helping patients when we find a solution to what's actually going on, help people come up with a plan, or in those settings where somebody's life would have been shortened and you made an intervention right then and it helped them, or in the ER when somebody's in the process of dying and you know, especially a younger person that's been in a trauma or something, like it makes a huge difference. And I'm so happy to be there, but we have to find the ability to do those joyful things, but not let ourselves, we kind of beat up our healers, and then it's hard to still be a healer because you're
Right.
not well yourself.
Yeah. We're so ingrained to be martyrs. We really are,
Yeah.
right? And I talk about this a lot. You got me on my soapbox. When when people talk about, when administrators, when other people talk about, hey, when cuts need to happen, when, the thumb screws need to be placed on, let's just go to the doctors and
Right.
say, hey, this is what you need to do. And instead of asking why, and instead of pushing back, most of us are like, we do it for the patients. They know that we are going to give ourselves up for the patients
Right.
because that's an oath we made,
Yeah.
right?
First, do no harm, and
And
patients
exactly.
first. Yeah.
And everybody else is more than happy to take advantage of that, right? And I think to survive as a profession, to survive as a person, and just to live a great life, I think we need to take that mindset back and say, hey, yes, I deserve to be happy. I deserve, my family deserves me to have them around them. And, I'm going to do this for me and my family.
Yeah, no, I love it. And I totally agree with you. And I love that, you know, there's more than one way to do this, Leo, but I love that you have found this through telemedicine. And I can tell you're passionate about it. And it's not just a way to like escape medicine, but it is a way to adapt so that medicine works for you and for your family.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You're right. Right. And we were talking about this earlier, right? A lot of doctors get burnt out and go out in different avenues, non-clinical, so forth and so on. But yeah, this is a great hybrid. This really is. And, I've definitely found a lot of clinical fulfillment. When I reach out to a mom that doesn't have resources, who doesn't know who to turn to at 2 a.m. their time, and I'm the person there, it's a great feeling. They
Absolutely.
leave and they're like, thank God, I'm a first time mom. I didn't know what to do. I was going crazy, but thank you for talking me off the ledge.
Yeah.
So, that's a great feeling.
No.
And I miss that feeling, in the ER. So,
No, I just I appreciate you opening up about this, Leo. Like it's been just a wonderful thing to kind of walk through this. So I I want to just highlight your podcast, Telemedicine Talks. I think that's one thing as a great resource for someone to start. Are there any other resources or tools as we kind of wrap up here? Any other things you would point people toward?
yeah, yeah, you check it out. Check out, telemedicine communities. There's some programs out there that teach you how to be a telemedicine doctor safely. Okay, you want to focus on not just a lot of these programs, hey, how to make the money, so forth and so on, but how to do it safely.
Hmm.
Make sure that the priority's out there. Um, but find these communities. What my community was called allinremote.com. So that's another community. Another thing, you want to have good guidance and kind of the rules. That's where Phoebe's company kicks in.
Uh-huh.
Um, you you can check her out on our podcast. We have our contact information there. So those are good starts. Reach out. I'm going to plug our email, but info@telemedicinetalks.com. If you have any questions whatsoever, just drop us a line and we could help, direct you the way.
Yeah. Well, and I think a lot of contacts happen through these kind of things. Like the physician community really is rather small, and we can talk to each other via these telemedicine, or excuse me, through a podcasting. We can do it through LinkedIn. We can do it through emails. I mean, there's just a lot of ways to talk, and I've found doing this. There's so much more that connects us and unites us as doctors than what divides us. There's just not that many of us. And so you talk to people, and
Absolutely.
if you want to make a shift and you feel like you are experiencing that burnout and frustration, reach out to me, talk to Leo. Let's connect the dots, because you have this wonderful gift as a physician. You have the intellect and the training, and we want to keep people in medicine. Keep practicing. If there's a way to do it so it still works for your life, it's a gift for yourself and a blessing to your patients as well.
No, absolutely. Totally agree. 100%.
Yeah.
100%. And you deserve it, right?
Yeah.
You deserve it as a clinician to do that.
No,
So,
it's so cool. Leo, I really appreciate you taking the time. This has been fascinating. I've really
yeah, I've
enjoyed
totally
kind of
enjoyed
walking
this.
through this.
Yeah, this is awesome. Thank you. It's a great pleasure meeting you.
Yeah,
It's
likewise.
super awesome.
Likewise. I
So,
hope you keep in touch. I'm really interested to see where your career goes, and I will keep following along.
same here, same here. I'm totally in line with kind of your thought in this podcast. It's definitely interesting to see, doctors actually focusing on their happiness. So,
Yeah,
it's awesome.
it's pretty cool. Thanks again, Leo.
Hey, thank you so much.
Thanks for tuning into the Doctors Making a Difference podcast. And thank you for what you do to help your patients and your community. Your work truly helps so many people. We produce this content to help you have the tools you need to stay in medicine and to highlight the amazing work being done by physicians around the world. Please note that while I am a physician and many of the guests on this program are also physicians or other professionals, the discussions on this podcast do not represent my employer or any professional organizations to which I belong. This podcast is for your information and entertainment only and should not be taken as professional advice. You should seek appropriate professional advice pertaining to your own situation. Please check out more of our content on our website, doctorsmakingadifference.com. Also, please follow, like, or subscribe on your podcast player or YouTube channel and give us a 5-star rating. It really helps to spread the message. Finally, if you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, or if you'd like to nominate someone else to be a guest, please visit the website or email admin@doctorsmakingadifference.com. See you next time.